Now, I might be showing my age here, but a long time ago in point 12, Reserve got added, and it was nuts. It was an amazing map that had crazy loot, and honestly, it was one of the best maps in the game. Unfortunately, Battlestate games always do this. When a new map comes out, it's crazy good, but then they slowly nerf it little by little until it's trash. And honestly, Reserve has been kind of trash. They did, however, buff the loot modifier by a fair bit, and it's actually worth running again. The weird thing is, though, a lot of the rooms that used to be good are no longer good, and some of the rooms that I considered trash are actually worth using now. So we're going to revisit some of my favorite keys for Reserve, and some of my thoughts on the best keys that you can buy for one of my favorite maps in Tarkov. This tradition, we're going to start up here at Dome, and we're going to be starting with one of the best keys in my opinion, and that's RB-KPRL. Now, this key is about 100k, and the reason that it's really good is that it's 100k, and you can make that back really easily. You've got a safe up here in the top that you can search for anything like bronze lines, you name it. You got some weapons attachments. The best part here is you've also got a double intel spawn, so there and also there. You got a mini safe on the ground that can also spawn loose cash. Another safe, a weapons crate, and you've also got a weapons cabinet here that sometimes spawns guns, but not very often. The reason KPRL is good is it's near your extract, cliff descent, which is just over there. So it's sort of something you do along the way. As well as the fact that you can also open this one here nearby, an unlock guard check, where you get another safe, an intel on top of the safe. You got intel on top of there, and you've also got a key spawn RB-AK up there. So you've got plenty of different options when you're around this area. All right, so we're going to head up to the second floor now, and we're going to have a look at two more keys in the Dome building. Now, these two keys aren't great, but they're incredibly cheap. They're about 45 to 50k, and the first one is called RB-KORL, or KORL. And we're actually going to be checking this room here, and the reason is it's super, super cheap, and we've got an intel spawn on top of the filing cabinet, also on the chair, and a possibility on the desk. So I just checked this quickly, and sometimes you can also search these filing cabinets, which give you a good search skill. Nearby to that, you have RB-RS. Now, RB-RS is trash. I know it's cheap, but I don't even bother checking it. It's that bad. You guys can buy it for like 35k or maybe 40k. It's not great. I don't bother with it. Next to this room is RB-RLSA, or Rizla. Now, this room used to be really, really, really good. You used to come in here, and on the left-hand side, there's a bunch of military tech loot. The reason that I keep this room is literally for two things and two things only. You've got intel that spawns right there. And you've got a really, really rare chance of finding a power filter, a military power filter, military cable, and some of those military items I talked about still spawn. So there's a chance that it's there. It's just very rare. You can also check all of these filing cabinets if you want some search skill. And then this one here. And then I usually just jump out this window and head towards cliff descent extract, which is just over here. So you can see why that I keep these keys. I do KPRL, the unlock guard shack, jump out, and then leave. So you can see here, I'm away from Dome. We have white pawn on my right-hand side there. We're not going to be worrying about that building because I don't really like the keys that are in there. There are a couple, but I don't really bother looting them. There's two keys inside black pawn, the one next to it, that I loot all the time. The first and most obvious one is going to be your RBBK. This is a marked room, and this is around 50 to 60k. Really good key for the value because you can make it quite quickly back. You can check this pile of blood here for ammos and other various items. I also check these jackets to make sure stuff hasn't phased inside of them. You can sometimes get lucky with different various guns here, like the Scar H and such. I usually check this book here. You can sometimes find Bitcoin and gold chains in there. Also along this side here, I always check around here. And well, last but not least, I stick my neck into this couch. Now, this room isn't always good, but I usually check all those spots, and you can make back the 50 to 60k definitely in the 25 runs of the 25 uses that you have. So it's not a bad investment to have, especially sometimes late in raid you rock up and for some weird reason the room's not unlocked. So it's not horrible to have. As well as the fact that when we're here checking that room, you may as well go over to this room, and this is one of my personal favorites in the game. This is RB-TB. This is definitely one of the best keys in Reserve because it's super cheap, around 50 to 60k, sometimes at 40k. And it also has really good attachments. You can find drum mags like you can see here, usually full of some solid ammo that's got BT in it. You can find boxes of good ammo. You can see I found BS there. You've also got attachments along here. You've got AKs that spawn in there. And on the ground, you've also got some more attachments that you can find. Sometimes some rarer attachments like forward shift grips and other things that fetch various money. It takes you about one run to pay the key off and more. So this is a really, really good value key. So next up, we have Black Bishop. You can see the front of the chopper here. We're going to be walking into Black Bishop or School. Depends on what you guys want to call it. And on the first floor here is one of the best keys in reserve. This is called RB-AM. Now, this key is also weirdly cheap, around 60k, depending on the time of the market. You can also come in here and you can find sometimes things like this. You see this bad boy right here? The military COFDM. These bad boys are worth a fair bit of money. You can also find other types of military loot in between the gaps of this box. It's not as common as it used to be, but it's still a pretty solid spawn. You can find some nice attachments along the top desk here if you're lucky. You've got a triple toolbox to search, as well as that you can find things like air filters and other different types of water filters spawning in the gaps there. Another great thing about this room is on the stool down below, you also have an intel folder. You got this large box you can search and a jacket. So around about 50 to 60k for all of this. This is one of the best rooms in reserve, hands down. All right, so we're going to be running over from Black Bishop over towards White Bishop, and this is a really, really good building. You may recognize this building as the Med building, and there's plenty of things you can loot inside this building that are worth your time. But heading inside the Med building, usually I check the floors in here and all the different gaps, especially this room right here. This is one of my favorite rooms. I check the ground here for meds. You can find ophthalmoscopes and other sweet stuff. After I'm done here, I'm going to head up to the next floor. And the thing is with these next two rooms is I have to have a quick disclosure with you guys. If we turn left here, we're going to look at one of the first unlocks in the Bishop building. And this is called RB-SMP, or I call it SIMP. The thing is, though, this key is really good. It's a great key. It's got great loot inside of it, and it's got everything that you can want med-wise. The problem, however, is it's a quest key. You need it for a quest later down the line for Therapist, and because of that, it's worth about 400k on the flea. Sometimes 500k, depending on the time of the market. So although it's a really good room, and you can definitely make that back in the 100 uses that you get with all the meds that you can find on the ground, especially stims like Mule or SJ6 sometimes spawning on the ground, it's a really, really good room. I just did want to point out, though, that it is really expensive. So that's something to consider. Sometimes if you don't come to this building enough, the value isn't really there. But me personally, whenever I need meds or if I'm coming through this building, I definitely always check this room because I can find things like ophthalmoscopes and other great loot items. I haven't seen anything like a LEDX, but it's still pretty solid. All right, so next to SMP is another room here called RB-KSM or KSM. This room as well is also a quest key, so it's about 300 to 400,000 rubles on the flea market, which is a lot. Now, this room is okay because you can find some solid meds on the ground. Like sometimes you can find things like Golden Star or maybe, you know, SJ6s and stuff on the ground. You can also find like ibuprofen in the gaps of the shelf, and you got a duffel bag. But other than that, is it 400k good? Probably not. You do need it for a quest where you got to grab a document in here. So if you have it already, you may as well keep it. But if you're going to go out of your way to buy it, I probably wouldn't. It's still a pretty good key to have, especially if you have SMP, because you can just hit that and the floor down below and then get out with a bunch of med loot. All right, so moving away from White Bishop, we're heading into the next building here called King. And this building is one of the hottest buildings in reserve, period. There's a lot of blokes in here punching on at any sort of given stage, but we are going to be heading down towards the basement for a key here. Now, the thing is, there's two keys down here, but let's just get into that real quick here. As we come down, there's a room here on the right that you can unlock called RBGN. And in some of my previous videos, I talked about how good this room is. It's not so good now. In fact, it's kind of fucking terrible. So I don't even bother looting it. In fact, I don't even bother coming here in this area very much at all. But if I do come here, I don't unlock RBGN. You can sometimes, and I mean very rarely, find an air filter or a tank battery. So if you need either of those two items, maybe consider buying it. It's about 50k, 60k on the flea, so it's not horrible. Next to RBGN, however, is another room called RBOP. Now, this is about 45 to 50k, and this room, however, is actually so much better. I come in here all the time if I come down this area because I have the filing cabinet, But the main reason is you've got intel that spawns there on top of the bench, on top of these papers, and you've also got a gold chain / rare spawn. So if it's 40-50k and you find a gold chain once, you've almost paid off the key. So you can see that the room isn't super great all the time, but having that chance of finding an intel there or also on the chair is worth the 50k in my opinion. All right, so we're moving away from King. We're going to be heading towards the next building next to it, which is Black Knight. This is opposite the White Knight building. So these two are just basically identical, facing each other. Inside Black Knight, there are 3 keys that we're going to be having a look at here. Now, you don't need to buy all of them. I just wanted to point out a few things. As we come into the first floor, there is one room here that you can unlock with the metal bars over the front of it, and this is MP12. Now, depending on the time of the flea market and what you can get it for, this is a pretty solid room. The reason being is that you can get an intel here on the left of this green box. You've got a jacket, some all-right attachments, which will pay off quite quickly. And if you find a key in the jacket, you know, you've got that, as well as the fact that you can find a tank battery on the ground. So this is an okay room. If it's 50-60k for MP12, pretty solid. If you come to this building enough, you can pay it off very easily. You know, it's not too much. As we come upstairs, though, we're going to have a look at another 2 keys. And I wanted to make something very clear about one of them. As we turn left, we're going to see this door right here. This is MP11. Now, this key is about 40k on the flea market, and I'm not really even sure why it exists. You can find an intel here, but I've never actually seen it. I've just been told that there's one that spawns there, and I've checked it countless times and I've never found it, but someone in my community is adamant that it spawns there, so I've been coming in here regularly to check it. Also on this chair, I've been having a look, and over here near this folder, but I still haven't found absolutely anything on any of the chairs or anything in here. The sole reason, I guess, to buy this key is that you get a toolbox and a jacket, but you know, for 40k, it's a bit of a rip-off if you ask me. But it is next to a room here which is pretty damn solid, and this is MP21. This is one of the better keys inside the building, in my opinion, because you have an intel that spawns there, you got another one that spawns there, and you also have a bunch of ammos that can spawn in this gap. It can pay itself off quite quickly. You can have a tank battery on the ground, you can have a tank battery on top of the table, you've got AKs, you've got attachments all along here, with sometimes you can find mags with good ammo. So it's a pretty solid room. Another reason I like this room as well is that when I come in here, I can jump on this table and I can have a look at Dome from a bit of an unexpected angle with my bolt action. You can see into Dome, and on the rocks there, if you think something's sussy up there, you can have a bit of a scan, and it's a pretty good angle to have anyway, just for that pure reason alone. All right, so we're going to be running away from Black Knight into White Knight, the building opposite. We're going to be looking at 2 keys. When we push in here, you do need to be careful of Gluha and the gang, but this is a pretty good building for various reasons. There's plenty of loot to be found. We're going to be finding this caged off door at the back here, and this is MP13. Now, a quick disclosure about MP13. You can find stuff like these air filters, which I happen to get kind of lucky here and find. You can also find an intel that spawns directly on that chair there. And you also have some random miscellaneous spawns along here, like tools and other things that you might want. I did want to point out this room is okay. Okay at best. So I managed to buy this key for about 50k on the flea market. But the thing is MP13 is quite rare. So sometimes people list it on the flea market for like 500k, even though it's definitely not worth that. So have a look around. If you see it for 200k, it's definitely a ripoff. If you can try and get it under 100, it's worth it for sure. It's a pretty good room to have anyway, for the pure fact that you can unlock this and get an angle into the guard tower or anything you need to do for PvP reasons. It's a pretty good room to check if you need tank batteries, so there's that as well. So it's not a waste, just be careful about the price. All right, so we're going to be going up to the 3rd floor here and going to go to the roof, and we're going to drop down a hole. This is the way you got to get to the 2nd floor in this building. So you come down here, and we're going to be going towards this room right here, which is MP22. MP22, I managed to get this bad boy for around 70k, I think, or 65. The reason that it's pretty good is that you have a tank battery that can spawn on the ground and on the table there. You got a couple AKs if you ever need a free gun on a run here and you just want a free AK just to zero to hero your ass off. You've also got toolboxes, plenty of different ammo in this box here. You can get some goodies. You can also get some pretty alright attachments along the top of this box here. So it's a pretty good room. If you can cop it for around 50 to 60k, you can pay that off quite easily with this room. It's a pretty good angle as well. You got some other things around this area that you'd want to loot anyway, so it's not completely horrible. All right, so we're going to be heading away from Black Knight and White Knight. You can see Dome over there, and we're going to be heading into what I call the night garages. You can just call this garage or whatever you want to call it. And there's a room here which is called RB-ST. Now, you've probably heard of this room because it's the bane of your damn existence and you need it for a quest and you can't buy it or you can't find it. Or let's just talk about the room real quick though. You do have a weapons crate and some ammos that spawn on your right hand side. On these pallets you have a bunch of Sten tank batteries that can spawn, as well as phase array elements, those giant CPU looking sons of bitches. You've also got ammo in all of these boxes and some pimped out AKs that can spawn sideways. You've also got another AK spawn over here, including more ammos inside any of these open boxes. On top, you have a double grenade box, an open green container. You've got a pallet back here that can spawn some good attachments, a large weapon crate, and if you jump on top of the truck, you have another large weapon crate. For that reason alone, in pure value, we need to talk about the price. Okay, this thing is about 1.8 mil to maybe 2 mil, depending on the time of wipe. It's a little bit more earlier in wipe. You can't even buy them. Now, here comes the question. If you play reserve a lot, is it worth it? Definitely. This room can actually pay itself off quite quickly. You do have a bunch of crates in here that you can search. You can get RGOs. You can get attachments in that box. You've got that large bad boy there, that one there, and also the weapon crate at the front. Is it 2 million good? Probably not. If you don't have the key, you don't want to do the quest, and you don't care, I probably wouldn't. But the chance of getting a couple phase array elements mixed in with a tank battery, also the fact that not a lot of people come through this area that often, so a lot of the time this room is locked. I did want to point out there is another consideration you need to make. If you are in here looting, there's only one way in and one way out, so you can get stuck in here very easily. I've had a lot of fights where I've either pinned someone inside this building or I've been stuck inside this room, so that is something to consider. It can pay itself off, but will it pay itself off? You would have to get kind of lucky for those 100 runs to get about 2 mil worth out of this room. But it is right next to manhole exit, so that's something that you need to think about. All right, so we're here over at the train station, and we're going to be heading down towards the hermetic extract. You can see one of the extracts right there. One of those bad boys that you need to use if the power's on. And we're going to be heading down towards the hermetic cages. Now, in previous wipes, these cages were pretty good. And by pretty good, I mean they had enough money that you could pay them off quite easily. But they were also worth a fair bit more than they are now. The truth is, each one of these cages, and there are 4 of them, you can see one on my left, and there's another one behind it, and there's one there, and there's one here. These are the 4 cages. These are PSP1, PSP2, PSV1, and PSV2. Buying all 4 of these is actually a really good investment. Now, I did want to point out that if you are on this side of the map, you generally don't want to be on this side of the map because being here kind of sucks. As a reserve main, you don't really want to be here because all the player scavs spawn around this area. They're all fighting around the train station, being a menace. But that being said, this is some of the most slept on loot in the game. And the reason is, each one of these keys are anywhere between 80 to 100k. That means they are super easy to pay off. And I can just show you what I mean. Each one of them has a different varying amount of crates inside of them. But let's just talk about the value of some of these crates. If we come inside and have a look at just some of them, I've done these quite often. And these ones here, these ration supply crates, are really, really good value. The reason being is that you can find things like condensed milk. That's 15k for one slot. You've also got things like sugar. And I've actually walked out of all of these cage rooms by searching all the ration supplies and walked out with maybe 6 to 8 sugar. And that's just on a standard run. Doesn't mean you're always going to get that, but coming down here and searching all of those for that reason alone, one sugar is like 80k on the flea. If the key cost 80k to buy, you only need 1 sugar to pay it off. And you've got 4 of these bad boys down here. All right, so we're here behind the train station at the B barracks, and there's 2 keys in here that we're going to be having a look at. The first one is going to be the marked room at the back here. This is called RBVO. Now, this is a solid room, and honestly, I come here quite often. However, you don't really want to be around here quite late in raid because of those player scavs like I was talking about. If you spawn near here, this is a solid room to come in, grab yourself a couple guns, check the floor here for any sort of things you might have missed. You can see I have a reception dot. You can find ammo. Check the chair for rare spawns up the top here in this plate on top of this pig, and also near this knife you can also find a couple of goodies. Make sure you have a really good scan around this room, as you can miss things quite easily. Alright, so as soon as I'm done the marked room, this is a solid room to have, and this is RB-AO. This is about 40k, really cheap, and the reason that it's a great room to have is two things. The first one is all the attachments that you can find on top of this table. You can find different various scopes, but the main reason that you want to have these is there's shit tons of AKs that you can find along this rack, but this is it. If you spawn near this area, someone most likely spawns down that area. So I use this room as a PvP angle. Sometimes people expect it, but not always. You can be really quick and sneaky. You can unlock this room, jump on this table, and then when someone comes up, you can hit them with a bit of a wide angle like that. You can also continue to see past the train, and if they run along the fence here, you can hit them with a bit of a surprise attack. So this room is good for not only loot, but also PvPing. It gives you a really nice angle, and for that reason alone, it's a pretty damn solid room. So to recap, the keys I think are actually worth even looting, or actually buying. For Dome, RB-KPRL, RB-RLSA, RB-KORL. For Blackpawn, RB-BK, RB-TB. For School, RB-AM. For White Bishop, possibly SMP and KSM, depending on whether you think you go there enough to justify the 400k price tag of both. King, we're going to be looking at RB-OP. For Black Knight, MP21 and MP12. For White Knight, MP13 if you can get it for a good price, and MP22 for 40k. For the Garage, we're looking at RB-ST, but this really comes down to preference and whether you think you'll actually loot it enough to pay off that hefty price tag of 1.8 mil to 2 mil. You can find some good loot in here, but it's honestly how much you loot it depending on whether you'll actually pay it off. Hermetic, we're looking at the PSP1, PSP2, PSV1 and PSV2. These are some of the best keys in reserve period. Although the area kind of sucks to loot, the stuff that you can find within the crates is insanely good. And last but not least, for the barracks, RBVO and RB-AO. So that's it for the key guide for reserve. Hopefully some of these keys bring you guys some crazy loot. I will be working on an updated guide for all of the maps. A lot of things have changed when it comes down to keys and what's behind them, so I'll be going through them slowly. As always, I am working on that recall video. It's still in the works, I promise you guys. As always, guys, we do have a Discord. I will link that down below. If you're looking for people to play with or just talk shit to, we have plenty of memes and other great people in the Discord. Thank you for watching to the very end, and we'll see you on the next one.